Humans eat metal for breakfast, said Zarn, moments before realizing he wasn't entirely wrong. The first day at the Intergalactic Academy of Unified Species was not what John expected. He'd imagined a noble institution of learning, with students exchanging ideas about warp theory and galactic ethics. Instead, it was an oversized zoo with laser pointers. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him, compound, multifaceted, glowing, or eye-stalked. It didn't matter. The whispers were constant. "That's the human," someone hissed in flicks. "I heard they breathed nitrogen," another gurgled. John tried to smile, which didn't help. Apparently, baring teeth was a sign of hostility for half the student body. "No offense," his roommate Grix, a four-armed insectoid, said, "but you're kind of terrifyingly soft." John blinked. "Soft?" "Yeah," Grix said, poking his arm. "No exoskeleton, no scales, no natural weaponry. You're like a walking pudding. How do you even survive?" "Gym membership," John replied, deadpan. Nobody laughed. The next day in weapons class, things got worse. The instructor, Commander Thal, a towering reptilian covered in ceremonial scars, eyed John with something between disdain and curiosity. "Today, we test your reflexes," Thal rumbled. "Each of you will handle a simulation of your homeworld's defense tools. For the human, yes, we found something primitive for you." He handed John an old projectile weapon, an M4A1 rifle, or at least a clumsy alien replica. The class burst into laughter. "It fires tiny bits of metal," one of the squid-headed students squealed. "What is that, a toy?" "Does it squirt water?" someone else added. John sighed. "Just give me a target." Thal activated the training drones, sleek spheres that zip in through the air, evading plasma bolts and energy arcs from the other students. Everyone missed. The drones were fast, unpredictable, impossible to lock onto. Then John stepped up. He loaded the magazine, flicked the safety off, and took a breath. The weapon barked once, twice, thrice. By the time the echo faded, the drones were smoking fragments on the ground. The silence was delicious. "Empty magazine," John said casually, handing the weapon back. Nobody laughed this time. Thal's eyes narrowed. How did you do that?" "Recoil management," John said, shrugging. "We practice." After class, Grix followed him, still buzzing in disbelief. You didn't even use targeting assistance. No neural link, no auto-aim." "We've got hands," John said, "and patience." Within a week, the story spread through the academy. The soft, weaponless mammal from the backwater world had taken out an entire drone swarm with a piece of ballistic plumbing. Soon, everyone wanted to see it again. They offered him all kinds of alien weapons to test. He handled each one like a professional, though he preferred the simple mechanics of his rifle. The others used plasma, ion, antimatter. John used brass and lead. "You humans are insane," Grix muttered one night as they studied together. "You build weapons that make holes in things instead of vaporizing them." "Vaporizing's too quick," John said, half joking. "Sometimes you want to remind the universe that physics still matters." Things changed fast after that. The Academy's military branch started inviting him to demonstrations. Professors whispered about human engineering, how their weapons didn't rely on exotic energy sources, how they could function in an EMP field or during atmospheric interference. When the Cathar Collective declared war on the Galactic Concord, the Academy was among the first to send its students into active duty. The aliens were confident. They had shielding technology, faster-than-light artillery, and bioplasmic soldiers bred for combat. Humans had bullets. The alien commanders laughed when they saw human ships arriving, primitive-looking, angular, gray. They stopped laughing when those ships shredded their fleets with kinetic rail slugs. At the Academy, John watched the battle reports stream in. "Humans are pushing back the collective," Grix said in disbelief. "They're winning," John nodded slowly. "We've had practice. Fighting each other. The other students couldn't wrap their heads around it. Entire species had gone millennia without conflict. Humans had managed thousands of wars in a few centuries. "You people are monsters," said one of the reptilian students, half in awe. "You fight over everything." Territory, belief, pride. Yeah, John said, but we also fight for each other. The war dragged on. Every week, more alien soldiers came back whispering stories of humans in exosuits running into plasma fire, of fighter pilots ejecting mid-battle and surviving because their armor doubled as re-entry gear, of Marines who refused to die even when their biosigns flatlined. They're impossible, one alien officer said during a debrief. They get hit and they keep coming. They run out of ammo, they throw their guns. They run out of guns, they use their fists. They run out of fists. He trailed off. They bite. Back at the academy, John was promoted to a training instructor. His first class of alien recruits stared at him with reverence. "You're the human from the story," one whispered, "the one who emptied the magazine." John smiled faintly. "That's me." He loaded a training rifle and motioned for them to stand. "Lesson 1, he said. You don't need fancy weapons. You need aim, discipline, and a reason." He paused, glancing around the room at the collection of bright-eyed alien cadets. "And remember, nobody laughs at you once you hit the target." He fired once, splitting a training drone straight down the middle. The recruits erupted in cheers. For the first time, John realized that maybe humans weren't the underdogs anymore. They were the example, and that scared everyone just a little. 3 months after the first drone demonstration, John's reputation at the Intergalactic Academy had become legendary. The once mocked, fragile ape was now a subject of hushed respect, especially among the military faculty. When he walked through the halls, the chittering and clicking quieted. Even Commander Thull, who had once sneered at him, now greeted him with a curt nod. The academy was no longer just a school. It had become a training ground for the ongoing war. Alien cadets and human instructors worked side by side, studying strategies, dissecting combat footage, and running endless drills. John found himself leading mixed species units through tactical simulations, teaching aliens the human way of war, adaptability, aggression, and the refusal to quit. "Remember," John told a group of trainees during a field exercise, "no matter what species you are, the enemy bleeds. You just have to find out how to make them do it faster than they can make you." His bluntness both disturbed and inspired them. That day, Grix watched from the sidelines, still slightly unnerved by how easily John commanded the battlefield. "You humans really don't know fear, do you?" he said later as they sat in the cafeteria. "We do," John answered. "We just get bored of it." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Cathar Collective was regrouping. They had suffered humiliating defeats at the hands of humanity and their allies, and now they were turning their attention toward the Academy itself, a symbol of unity and defiance. Intelligence reports began filtering in. Scout ships disappearing, communication relays jammed, strange energy signatures appearing in orbit. John was in the command center when the alarm sounded. "Multiple contacts incoming," an officer shouted. "They're dropping out of warp. Dozens of ships." The Academy's defense grid lit up, and the once peaceful orbital ring became a fortress. "They're targeting the Academy," Thull growled. "They mean to wipe us out." John grabbed his rifle and smirked. "Guess class is in session." The battle began with a tremor. Orbital cannons fired bright streaks across the void, meeting the Cathar fleet in flashes of molten metal. The Academy's shields flared as debris rained down through the atmosphere. Students scrambled for cover, professors barked orders, and alarms wailed through every corridor. John led a group of cadets to the western courtyard, where enemy dropships were breaching the perimeter. The sky glowed with plasma fire. "Positions," he yelled. The aliens hesitated. Most of them had never seen real combat. John slammed a new magazine into his rifle and pointed toward the advancing enemy. "Welcome to your final exam." The Cathar soldiers poured out of their transports, hulking, armored, and confident. They expected fear. Instead, they got humans. The first wave was cut down before they even cleared the landing zone. John's bullets punched through armor the aliens thought impenetrable, each shot precise and merciless. The cadets followed his lead, adjusting their aim, controlling their fire. Plasma bolts tore through the courtyard walls, but the humans and their alien allies didn't fall back. They advanced. "Suppress that ridge," John barked. Grix hurled an ion grenade that sent 2 Cathar flying. "We're outnumbered," he shouted. "Always are," John said, reloading. He knelt behind a fragment of wall, exhaled, and squeezed off another burst. 3 shots, 3 kills. The Cathar were starting to falter. They weren't used to opponents who fought dirty, who improvised, adapted, and turned desperation into strategy. John moved like a storm, calling out orders, keeping his troops alive. Cover left. Move right. Don't wait for me. Just shoot where they aren't looking. The aliens began to understand. Even Thal, who had taken command of the northern defenses, admitted through the comms, the humans' tactics are brutally effective. As the sun set behind the academy towers, the courtyard was a chaos of smoke, light, and shattered stone. The first wave of attackers was down, but more ships were descending. They're not stopping, Grick said. Good, John replied. Neither are we. Night fell and the academy became a battlefield of flickering fires and shadows. Every hallway turned into a choke point. Every classroom a stronghold. John led small strike teams through the ruins, clearing rooms and rescuing trapped students. You're insane, hissed a Varnian medic as John dragged an injured cadet to safety. You could have been killed. So could he, John said, nodding to the wounded alien. That's the point. Reports poured in of human-led units turning the tide all across the campus. What started as a desperate defense was becoming an organized counterattack. The Cathar, frustrated and disoriented, began to retreat to their ships, but the humans didn't let them go quietly. You're chasing them? Grix asked, panting as they ran through the smoke-filled hall. Of course, John said, his voice steady. You don't win wars by surviving. You win by finishing. By dawn, the academy was still standing. Half the buildings were in ruins, but the Cathar fleet had been driven back. John stood on a scorched balcony, rifle slung over his shoulder, watching rescue shuttles descend. Around him, alien cadets, many of whom had never fired a weapon before that day, saluted him in their own strange ways. Thal approached, his armor scorched but his eyes gleaming with newfound respect. Human, he said, I misjudged your species. I thought you reckless, unrefined. Dangerous. You were right, John said, cracking a smile. Thal actually laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made nearby students jump. Perhaps that's what the galaxy needs, he said. Something dangerous. The battle for the academy became a legend across the stars. News spread of how a single human instructor had turned a school into a fortress and taught aliens how to fight like humans. Across the galactic concord, recruitment surged. The phrase "empty the magazine" became a rallying cry, painted on warships and whispered in battlefields. Yet John knew this was only the beginning. The Cathar wouldn't stop. They'd lost a battle, not the war. Somewhere out there, their leaders were regrouping, planning their next move. He stood quietly at the observation deck that night, gazing at the distant stars. They'll come again, Grick said softly beside him. Yeah, John replied. And when they do, we'll be ready. He tightened his grip on the railing, eyes reflecting the cold light of distant worlds. Because now they know what happens when humans show up. The months that followed the Battle of the Academy forged John into something far greater than a teacher. He became a strategist, a symbol, and in many ways a weapon himself. Every cadet who had fought beside him now trained thousands more, spreading his methods of precision, grit, and unpredictable tactics across the stars. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive, was now the backbone of the Galactic Concord's military might. Yet victory had made them a target. The Cathar Collective, humiliated and burning with vengeance, assembled an armada unlike anything seen before. Entire star systems were emptied to build it. Their fleets stretched from orbit to horizon, bristling with weapons that bent gravity itself. They called it the Purge Armada. The day it arrived was the day the galaxy held its breath. On the command deck of the flagship Horizon, John watched the swarm of red signatures fill the holomap. There was no mistaking it. This was the endgame. They outnumber us 10-1, Grick said, wings trembling. That's a fair fight, John answered, checking his sidearm. They've got numbers. We've got something better. Across every human ship, soldiers prepared quietly, checking weapons, whispering the words that had become their creed. Empty the magazine. The Concord fleet formed a thin defensive wall above the world of Virulome, the last major stronghold before the Cathar could sweep into core space. The aliens' plasma cannons opened fire first, and the void erupted. The first volley tore through several Concorde cruisers, but the line held. Human ships answered with railgun barrages so dense that space itself seemed to ripple. Each kinetic slug screamed across the battlefield, ripping apart the sleek armor of the Cathar warships. "Focus fire on their carriers," John barked through the comms. "Don't let them launch ground forces." The horizon shuddered as enemy fire glanced off its shields. Sparks flew, alarms wailed, but the crew moved with mechanical precision. They'd trained for this moment. "Status on the ground teams?" John asked. "In position," came the reply. The plan was reckless, audacious, and pure human ingenuity. While the fleet distracted the Armada, strike teams would teleport directly into the Cathar flagship cluster to sabotage their reactors. No one expected to return. John volunteered to lead the first team. He stood in the teleport bay, surrounded by human marines and alien allies who had once doubted him. "You ready to make history?" he asked. "With you?" Grix buzzed nervously. "We're probably about to destroy it." The teleport field flared, and the world dissolved into light. They reappeared deep inside the enemy's flagship, a cavernous structure of black metal and pulsing energy conduits. The air shimmered with heat and ozone. Cathar guards roared and charged. John's team opened fire. Bullets and plasma bolts tore through the corridors, each impact echoing through the metallic halls. John led from the front, moving like a machine of focus and fury. "Keep pushing! Reactors ahead," he shouted. The team reached the reactor core, an enormous chamber of swirling plasma confined within a magnetic field. "Grix, get the charges set." John covered him, dropping targets one after another. The Cathar swarmed in, clawed, screamed, and died. One Marine fell, then another, but the humans didn't break formation. Not once. When the charges were ready, Grix shouted, "Timer set for 90 seconds. "Good," John said. "That's 89 more than we need." They ran. The corridor ahead was blocked, so John made a choice that history would never forget. He turned, stayed behind, and sealed the bulkhead door. "Go," he ordered through the comm. "That's an order." "John," Grix yelled, panic in his voice. "You can't." "I'm just emptying the magazine," John said with a grin. Then he turned and faced the oncoming tide. When the flagship detonated, half the Cathar fleet vanished in the blinding bloom of light. The shock wave rippled through space, tearing apart nearby ships, scattering the rest. The Concorde fleet advanced, hammering what remained until the enemy was gone. The war was over. Weeks later, a monument was built where the Academy once stood. It wasn't made of stone or metal, but glass and light, reflecting the stars above. At its base was a simple inscription: "He taught us how to fight." Then he showed us why Grix stood among the crowd, wings still, eyes reflecting the monument's glow. "He said humans were dangerous," Thol murmured beside him. He was right. And somewhere across the stars, the legend of the human who emptied one magazine became more than a story. It became the reason the galaxy still stood. Did you like today's story? Then catch our posts at 3 p.m. Eastern Time daily. Unfold more intergalactic stories with Professor Space.